Amy Dong is a 25-year-old author whose debut book, 21 Years Young, received praise from award winning social psychologists and the New York Times. From childhood shenanigans to major life shifts in college to facing a life threatening eating disorder, Amy shares it all. She tells her vulnerable story through self discovery, and it's a story that all young women would want to hear. I'm so excited to have Amy Dong on Her Very Own. Okay, so let's talk about your book, 21 Years Young. I read it twice, but first off, I love the title. It encapsulates your whole story. How did you come up with it, and what led you to decide to publish your essays?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the reason I came up with that title was twofold. One, because I recognized that when I was writing the book, I was still 20 years old, and when I published it, I was going to be 21. And that's a really young age for anyone to claim that they have the knowledge to write a book, especially a book of personal essays, and claim that they have something interesting to share with the world. But because I felt so strongly about it, and there were some messages in there that were mostly for me, I was like, this is really important for me to recognize my age and also not be afraid of that. And then the part about being 21 years young was, as many readers know, I talk a lot about a near death experience I had in one of the very first chapters. And for me, being 21 years old and 21 years young, having that perspective shift was really important for me to just acknowledge that even though I was on my second lease in life, I was still young and I had a lot to still learn and understand about the world, about myself, and also appreciate and try to enjoy.
Nice. So about the near-death experience, you went through orthorexia, am I right?
Hmm.
So that was something very similar for me, except mine was a much lesser extent. My eating disorder started with dancing, actually. I started dancing competitively. I switched schools, actually. And the people around me were like very, very skinny. And I thought that was the standard. And I really loved dance so much that I thought, like, this was the first step to becoming a good dancer. Like I had to look the same way as everyone around me. And I don't know, everyone goes through different experiences, but there's usually like something that kind of initiates some change in your brain to be like, oh, I desire this body and I'm going to do whatever it takes to get this level. And sometimes it turns your world upside down. So I was wondering like what kind of initiated your story?
Yeah, and thanks for sharing so vulnerably about yours, Nicole. It's definitely something that a lot of dancers struggle with, particularly in ballet. But for me, it was almost like a series of small events. I grew up medically obese for sure. I was a very chubby kid, and I started dance when I was 3. And I just remember a lot of instances where I would come out of the classroom and I would hear the moms talking about me and being like, oh, she's so cute, like she's so fat. And then there were times where I actually did go to China to compete at a relatively young age. And I distinctly remember one moment when I was in Hong Kong. I had just finished my solo, and I overheard a kid in the audience saying in Chinese, like, wow, she's so fat. I can't believe she's competing. And there were multiple instances where for me, I it was a big part of my personality to really want to be able to control things in my life. I was really, really type A, and I needed to be the best in certain aspects. And to me, similarly to you, I saw in dance that the ability to somehow control my body would be a really good thing. This was long before I truly understood what it meant to have like a genetically skinny body or of so many other factors that contribute to what a healthy lifestyle looks like. But starting in high school, I distinctly remember consciously trying to make that shift into eating, like not eating carbs anymore or eating a lot of vegetables. And it took a lot of work with my psychiatrist and my dietitian much later on after I'd been diagnosed to bring me out of this state of self-denial and basically to reteach me what it meant to eat and do something that's called in the eating disorder world like intuitive eating, where you're not telling your body what it needs, but you're really listening to your body and having it tell you what it needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you were going through this, were you aware that you were doing this to yourself or kind of like in the denial stage? For me at least, I started, yeah, avoiding carbs like you. And then for lunch, I would tell my mom like I'm not hungry. And I would only eat like a cup of Greek yogurt with fruit and nuts and honey with it. And like I would keep saying I'm not hungry, even though in the initial stage I was. And then it was to a certain point where I read this later on that your stomach actually like shrinks with the amount of food that you eat or not. So yeah, I actually did start to feel full after one cup of Greek yogurt. And my mom was like, oh, this is a problem. And then it wasn't until we went to see a doctor. And they always ask you like, when was your last period? And I was like, oh, 3 months ago. And my mom was like, what? And then that's when she started to be like, oh, this is like something you have to take seriously. And I cried at the doctor's appointment because I was like, no, I was still in denial. I was like, no, this BMI calculation is not correct. I'm still a kid. I'm not an adult. And I was finding all these excuses to say. But my mom was always there afterwards to remind me what happens if, your body kind of starts to shut down. So I understand that I read in your book, like you were studying abroad during that time and you had to like find a moment where I think that was the time when you started being full on. And for me, it was during COVID. So I guess it's like when the time is right that, or not, the time is wrong that we start going through this. But were you like in this denial phase as well?
Great question. And the human brain is a really powerful thing, and it can definitely trick us into fully believing a false reality. So to answer your question, absolutely. I was in a period of self-denial for many years, actually. My eating disorder, what started as orthorexia and turned into anorexia, it started in high school. Definitely noticed when things started shifting verbally, like people would come up to me and say, like, oh, Amy, you're a lot skinnier. I would feel really happy about that. And in my mind, I knew that there were moments I was really hungry and I would try to suppress those. And I would basically tell myself I was wrong. Like those are negative thoughts to have, they're immoral. And there was even a point where I felt morally superior to other people when I saw myself eating less than them, which is insane, right? And objectively speaking, it was insane. But to me in the moment it was like, no, this is a goal I'm setting for myself, so to not continue pursuing that goal is actually what's more insane than listening to my body. So that period of self-denial lasted for a long time, and I completely resonate with what you said. I remember sitting in that doctor's chair where they were telling me like I shouldn't have been alive. There was multiple things wrong with my tests, and I got angry. I said, "No, you're wrong. Like this is what I need for myself. Like I'm feeling happier, even though I probably wasn't." And I cried in the tricking me into going to see a doctor for anything to start changing. So, and that's what makes it so tricky for an eating disorder, because when anyone is going through it's a class of sort of mental illness as well. But you can't force anyone to change their ways. You really have to get them to do it themselves. But it's hard to be the person to even poke the bear in the sense, because when you're going through an eating disorder, the last thing you want to hear is for anyone to be commenting on what you're eating and what you're not eating. And Elaine told me, she was like, Amy, I risked your friendship with me and your love for me temporarily, because she was like, she thought that I would get really upset with her and not want to talk with her for a while. She was like, because I love you so much and because I knew there was something wrong, I had to bring you to a doctor to get you to see that. And that's so difficult. A lot of people don't have that person in their lives, or their friends might notice something but not understand what to do. And the greatest thing that helped me was just having someone point that out to me, even though they knew I'd initially be very upset with that happening.
Yeah, I get that too. It's kind of like edging the person to try to understand like what's really going on with their body. Like I remember afterwards, my mom was like, "Well, if you don't believe me, you should try to do some research on your own." And I did look up all this thing, and it was like, "Why does your period stop?" I was a big bio kid. Like I'm studying biochemistry, so it was like really interesting to me. when you don't put enough nutrition in your body, the first thing that shuts down the organ system is your reproductive system. And that's why your period is kind of like a signal to you that maybe your hormones are off or something is off. And that kind of really scared me into like, oh, wow, this is a big deal. And then I knew for myself that I need to like gradually introduce more carbs into my diet and return it to normal. But yeah, that is really the first step and the hardest step, that barrier is like recognizing it for yourself.
Definitely. When I was going through my eating disorder, one thing that many people do when they're going through eating disorders is fill themselves up with liquids or foods that are like bulky, is the best way I can describe it, like broccoli that fills you up because it's just there's just so much of it. Same thing with carrots. And for me, I gravitated towards eating a lot of carrots because they would fill me up. They would make me feel less hungry. And there was a period where I ate so many just like giant sticks of raw carrots that my skin was actually turning orange. And because it was such a gradual thing, like I didn't really notice it. It wasn't like a big deal to me. But when I stepped foot into the doctor's office for the first time, she was like, Amy, look at my skin and compare it to your skin. And she was like, taking into account the fact that everyone has different skin colors, just look how orange your hands are. And it was shocking to me when I actually like took a second to think about it and acknowledge that like, okay, yeah. And she tried to make a joke out of it because she knew how much it was affecting me. But she was like, you should probably stop eating orange foods from now on. Because the beta carotene and carrots and like and the coloring and sweet potatoes and oranges and all of that, like that can genuinely turn your skin orange. And so that was just a funny thing that happened as an unfortunate side effect of my eating too many vegetables and choosing to eat carrots. But if you notice yourself turning orange, maybe it's a good sign to stop eating some orange foods for a while.
Yeah. Switching gears, in my school, at least in like seventh grade, we all had to take a mandatory health class.
Mhm.
That class, we learned about like kind of like eating disorders, anorexia, and it's like, oh, don't do that. Did you learn that in your school, mandatory school too?
I'm actually incredibly surprised to hear that. I'm really happy to hear that. There was no education on eating disorders when I went through a health class. It was very much a general, and we had this in eighth grade, like a reproductive health
Mm.
rights, and class. So nothing about eating disorders. So I'm glad to hear that it's starting to be introduced, but also a little bit sad to hear because it probably just means that it's a very common thing.
Yeah, but I was kind of wondering. So for me at least, I knew that this was like a thing. And still years later, I was going through an eating disorder and I was like, no, this could never happen to me. And in my mind, I was like, I'm very healthy. Like I'm eating healthy, I'm exercising healthy. There's nothing mentally wrong with me still, even though I learned about all of this. So in your opinion, like what else can be done to kind of help teens and young girls, especially recognize that this is an issue and it might happen to you and it like actually might happen to you.
Yeah, I that's that and that like that is the most important question, right? Like how do you actually get people to realize this when they're in such effective self-denial about it? And I can't speak for everyone, but from my own experience, it has a lot to do with meeting someone where they're at and really understanding what their values are. And what I mean by that is, for example, for me, what really made me decide to change was when my doctors told me that I wouldn't be able to have a kid if this kept going on. Similar to you, I lost my period for over 2 years, and I was somehow able to convince myself that that was normal. Like for some reason, like maybe it was just biding its time, like it's totally. And I was like, great, like I don't have to deal with the cramps anymore. I thought it was a good thing. But when they sat me down and they were like, Amy, you can do whatever you want, right? Like you are free to make your own choices, but look at the facts, look at your blood test and the results, and look at the fact that you haven't had a period in 2 years. If that continues to happen, you won't be able to have a family. And for me, because I was someone who was always like, I can't wait to have a family one day, like I really do want kids, I would that was the moment where I was like, okay, like I can't do that to my future potentially not even possible to be born child. And that was a crucial moment. For other people, it might be, you know, if you continue like this, you won't be able to perform a hobby that you really like. Like your body will be too weak to support your dancing in like a career. For some people, it might be around losing friends or losing family, and for some others still, it's just around like you simply won't be happy because your body won't be producing enough of the right hormones and the right like energy to support you in like any way, which is why a lot of people with eating disorders simultaneously struggle with anxiety or depression, and they're all like very mixed in together. So with that being said, that's why it's so critical for anyone on the outside who's seeing like maybe one of my friends, they'll notice that um or not my friends, but like there might be a friend who notices one of their friends is potentially struggling with an eating disorder. The best thing they can do is really sort of like lightly approach the subject, see if they're willing to talk. And if they are, then, you know, really hear from them, like what's important to them, like why are they doing this? You know, how can they help? And a lot of it has to go back to your own values. And is starving yourself or is getting that certain body type or might be binging, right? Like it might be the other, there's so many different types of eating disorders, but is doing all of that to your body worth what you might be losing? And that was what really helped me.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And after going through this difficult experience, how did it impact, like, I know you said your perspective changed on your life. How did it change your viewpoint?
Yeah. Um, well, I was pulled out of university for a semester after a doctor initially diagnosed me with everything because it was just so bad. And instead of going back to school and seeing friends and doing what like a normal 19-year-old person would be doing, I was at home every day, not allowed to exercise, not even allowed to like walk up the stairs quickly. And all I was able to really do is read a ton of books on like mortality, on life, on values and morality. And it just that period of time, I actually think I learned more about myself and about what I valued in life than I ever could have had I gone back to university. And it really made me grateful for my sister, for example, who risked a lot to even send me to the doctors, my family and my body. As difficult as it was to get myself to start eating more again, it was a horribly difficult process. It did make me realize that there are more important things in life than how I look. And going back to university the next semester, I genuinely felt like I had a second lease on life, which meant that everything I was doing, everything I chose to do was a bonus. Like it was something extra that I didn't necessarily just earn. It wasn't something that was owed to me, and it was extra. So thinking about everything in terms of bonus time made me a lot more intentional about the things I was doing. Like if tomorrow were really my last day, like who are the people I want to see? If something happens again, like what are the courses I really want to take? Like where are the places I really want to travel? And having, if any of you have read Atul Gawande's book Being Mortal, one of his lines really is so important to me, which is the idea that it's not really about the time that helps you have a certain way of thinking. It's really the perspective that you have. And a lot of perspective just comes from experiencing different things. And one of those might be like a near-death experience, which is why like a 20-year-old who maybe has gone through a car crash has a lot more things to think about than a 60-year-old who's just had like a very normal life. And that's definitely something that happened for me.
Okay. So about that, like I know you were switching careers also. I think you were working on Wall Street when you
Mhm.
first had a job. But did that kind of like shift your perspective on what you actually wanted to do in life and, for example, like how you viewed success?
Yeah, I will say I worked in like private equity and banking for 2 summers just to see what it was like, but I did not enjoy either of those internships. So even if I had not had gone through this, I definitely would not have found myself back in finance for sure. That is my very biased opinion. But the eating disorder definitely accelerated what for me the importance of finding meaning in whatever career I was doing. And that led me to apply for the Fulbright program where I was able to teach English in Taiwan for a year. And it also led me to where I am now, which is doing social impact consulting for the UN, for foundations, and for government. And I've specifically specialized in like organizational development, human development, like leadership development, which is all about like helping a person grow and learn and figure out like what is important to them and how they can make a positive impact in the world. And that's just I'm really happy in the job that I have. I will say like when you're working in social impact, you're not necessarily making the most money. But if I compare myself to, or if I just talk to my friends who are working in finance still, I can see such a stark difference in the amount of meaning that we sometimes find from our work. Fortunately or unfortunately, we do spend the majority of our time, at least as a young adult in our careers, like working in our jobs. So to not find any sort of meaning in that to me is would be a waste.
So would you say your view of like success changed from high school until now? If so, how so?
Yeah, I social success in terms of like popularity, if people were knew what you were doing and if they were proud of you and like interested in your accomplishments. And from like at that point, I was on social media a lot. I cared about the number of likes I got on my Facebook profile picture, and I've basically done a complete 180. I don't really use social media at all, other than to call friends. My close friends know that I'm horrible at texting, but if they call me, I'll pick up and I'll just call people out of the blue. And that part of success for me is around just feeling loved. Like there's a big part of success for me now that is around genuinely loving the people that I surround myself with and vice versa. And also feeling like I am doing something that doesn't harm the earth and actually hopefully helps the people around me. And then the last piece around success is I think it's so much about feeling comfortable with yourself. I've picked up a lot of meditation and I now have a coaching certification where for myself at least, I do a lot of work in like self-development, self-growth, like what are the values that matter to me and like are all the things that I'm doing aligned with those values? And then I work with a lot of young adults now and help them really figure out, you know, am I getting enough fun and enjoyment in my life? Is my view on my friendships and my relationships healthy? Is my relationship with myself healthy in so many ways? And those are the kinds of questions that I think success should revolve around and not at all around sort of where you stand in a social or public eye.
And financial too.
Yeah. Financial, well, this one is still where I'm still doing work. Financial stability is incredibly important. I would never suggest to someone to pick up a career where they can make no money and spend every day kind of stressing about money. At the same time, it's like what a lot of academics say, like there's a certain threshold of like a livable income. And then past that threshold, there's so many other factors that make up meaning and happiness other than and just money. So money can buy happiness to a certain degree. I think that is actually quite true. But it should definitely never be the only factor. Because they're like $1 million a year, but if you are unhappy with where you are in life otherwise, like that doesn't really make sense to me. Yeah.
So you ended off your book. I think you were right about to go to your Taiwan trip. And also, I don't know if you started your consulting job before that, but how did you kind of pave yourself into like a career option that you wanted and you found happiness and success in, when it's like a little bit untraditional? And I don't know if you completed your degree in finance or switched to journalism or.
I actually never took a single finance class in Stern, which is hilarious because it is known for finance. And the only reason is because I did a finance program for called Girls Who Invest my freshman summer, and I learned everything there was to know for 4 weeks in an intensive, and I was like, I don't like this. But that was the key, recognizing that I did not like something and actively choosing to avoid it or to look for other things. I think in university, what happens is that the jobs that are the most visible end up being the places where most people go. A lot of that is in finance or in banking. But I distinctly remember choosing not to go to any banking recruiting events because I knew if I went, I'd probably apply, I might get a job offer, and then I would actually have to consider it. Instead, what I did was I only applied for jobs in public policy or in political or social impact consulting. There were many fewer organizations, but in my mind, it's like if I don't get into one of these, I'd rather have that than to get into a banking job that I know I wouldn't like, and then probably just end up getting sucked into. It's like a vacuum. It really it's hard to get out of that once you're in it, especially once you have what people call are the golden handcuffs, where you make a lot of money and you're used to a certain lifestyle. I'm not used to that lifestyle, but also I don't feel like I'm losing out on that much because I like haven't seen it yet.
So for a lot of people who maybe like are in college and it's their first year and they don't know what they're doing, or they don't know like what they want to do when they grow up, or have their career paths in, it's like, what do you suggest for them to do?
The first one is just explore, be open-minded. Like I was interested. I had no idea what finance was, for example, and I was so interested in learning about what it was. So try a bunch of different things. Don't only join like one club or try like one internship. You have so many summers to do like various activities. And if you find something that you like, really figure out why you like it, and vice versa. If you find something that you don't like, why do you not like it? Is it the hours that you're working? Is it the type of work that you're doing? Do you enjoy being intellectually stimulated, or are you actually more interested in getting a job that has really easy hours so that you can enjoy other things outside of life? Like those are all really important questions. And I would actually recommend watching recently uploaded Netflix show called I think it's like How to Live Your Rich Life or How to Get Rich. And the host talks about richness not in terms of necessarily only just financial wealth, but also like what is a rich life? Is it the flexibility that you want? Is it owning a home? Is it having as many pets as you want? There's so many different factors that can contribute to a wealthy, like rich life. And for university students, I think a critical question is just asking like, what does that look like for you?
Okay. Thank you. Okay, that's amazing. That's all the questions I have, and it was really inspiring and motivating to listen to your story, and I hope other people can relate to it and also get something out of everything you just said, because that was awesome. And read your book, because at so many moments it was like, oh my God, I relate to this so much.
Thanks, Nicole. It was really great being on your podcast.